Average Joe travels the California Inscape. Season 5, Children of the Pumpkins. Episode 9, Pumpkin Apocalypse Now. Story by Penguin Pete. Written by Clyde Wren. Dodge Zelko at reception. And featuring the vocal stylings of This Is Signal. A man very wise in the ways of business once wrote that the time to buy was when there was blood in the streets. I wondered what he might say about pumpkin guts. Yes, pumpkin guts. Anne and I had made it to the Packard in a narrow escape from the pumpkin cult's farm. But as we closed in on the barricaded town square of Chatterskull Falls, it became more and more difficult to navigate the gunfire, various combatants, and, you guessed it, the pale orange slime of pumpkin gore. The Packard skidded to a stop by the red and white wooden barricade. Anne and I exited the car and found Chief Wankins crouched at the bumper of his squad car, either evacuating himself or taking shelter from the mayhem. Upon closer inspection, he seemed to be simply cowering in a presumably continent state. He saw us approaching and began to shout.
You two, look at this. Do you see what's happening out here? I hope you have a damn good idea of what to do about it. Get out there. Put a stop to these freaking gourds.
While I must confess I was terrified at what we were seeing, Wankins would never know it. It takes more than a badge and false swagger to get into that show. Yeah, we see it, Wankins. You settle into your command post here. We'll be cleaning the streets. See you at the water spew after. Bring your wallet, buddy. I turned to the chaos surrounding us and surveyed the battlefield. Anne stood with a wand held out in front of her like a fencer might hold her foil. I nudged her and spoke. Hey, we know these two. Give 'em hell, Barsoom.
Barsoom hate orange!
Jack and his manservant, the Titanic hair steak, Barsoom, were in the middle of 6 pumpkin golems, each one bigger than a man but still a foot shorter than Barsoom. The beast swung from a street light above them and dispatched 2 of the golems with his feet. 2 more met a similar fate with Barsoom's fists. The remaining 2 were united as Barsoom took 1 in each hand and slammed them together, resulting in an impressive display of exploding pumpkin heads. Jack gave us a polite wave. Hiya, Joe, Anne. Baffle 'em with boulding, right? Or maybe the whole bowl. I nodded and smiled as I heard the whoosh of a fireball spell behind me. Anne had just snuffed out another 6 golems. She'd also ignited the roof of Gurdjieff's pharmacy. She covered her mouth with her free hand, but I could still hear her concern.
Oh, no.
On the other side of the square, opposite the fire, multiple shotgun blasts captured our attention. Roarin' Roy Stabbers was strolling up Market Street toward the square with a handful of his bounty-hunting associates. They mowed down every golem in their path. The only time the bounty hunters veered from a straight line was when a car swerved to avoid one of the pumpkin carcasses. Roy and his crew were forced onto the sidewalk to evade the speeding vehicle before it crashed headlong into a light pole. He shouted to us. Average Joe Detective Agency, how y'all making out? Sorry if we got a little too lively before. Bet you're glad to see us now, though. Before we could respond to Roy, the sound of propellers overhead took center stage. Personnel in military gear rappelled one by one from the nearer of the 2 helicopters onto the ground. One of them held a megaphone and began to deliver commands. Would all pumpkin-headed entities please lay down your arms and heads? By golly, if it wasn't our old buddy Special Agent Cooper from the Central Intelligence Agency. He and his massive budget would certainly be helpful. It seemed to us most of Chatterskull Falls was here. It was, I suspect, the great battle of our time. Scratch that. It was, I hope, the great battle of our time. Humanity against marauding pumpkins created by a cult without a plan. People who probably all started out in bad directions to begin with. Some of these cultists ran frantically through the streets now, screaming, wondering if they were hallucinating, dying, or worse, neither. A battalion of Christian Youth Scouts marched toward the square on Front Street, brandishing camping shovels and canteens, the oldest among them no more than 14. A handful of death fairies sat on a power line, giggling and tittering as they watched the violence below unfold. Two familiar figures swung machetes at pumpkin men. Hey, Anne, do we know these two? She zeroed in on the figures who were busy chopping away.
Moth cultists. Maybe they think we're fighting some kind of turf war.
Ah, yes. Then I remembered. The moth cult. Drawn to battle like moths to a battle. Whatever. Say what you will. I'm no poet. I'm just an average Joe, and that's all you...
Joe, we have to move. Look!
Anne interrupted my little quip for a very good reason. Starwing was about 50 yards away, pinned down against the front of Wilkinson's family restaurant. She was leafing frantically through what must have been a spell book, keeping the golems at bay with small gouts of flame that sprung from her hands. She wouldn't last much longer, though. Working in a shop with books about magic doesn't make you a sorcerer any more than working at the Ford factory makes you a race car driver. Anne grabbed my sleeve and pulled me forward as she spoke.
We have to help her. She doesn't stand a chance out there alone.
With that, we ran toward Starwing's position. The golems lurched forward, and we could no longer see Starwing or the magical fire she had used to survive this long. There were only vines, pumpkins, and their scarecrow bodies. We would be too late. Then a wave of force put us both on our backs with a thud. I was back to my feet first, and as I helped Anne stand, sounds a lot like handstand, I witnessed an awe-inspiring sight. Lucretia St. Germain, on the back of her Bengal tiger companion familiar, Solomon, for 'twas his name, came bounding down the street toward Starwing. Lucretia held a leather strap with a stone at the end. Swinging it in a circle above her head, Lucretia was a bizarre replica on the ground of Cooper's helicopters above. She shouted a word, and another shockwave burst from the stone and leveled her foes. Pumpkins broke against the front windows of Wilkinson's as their bodies collapsed. A petrified Starwing slowly gathered her things and stood. The sound of an approaching storm crept toward the battlefield. It sounded like the thunder came from the west. Great, so let's do this in the rain, I thought as I scanned the dark sky. But what I saw there was no thunderhead. It was a pumpkin the size of a house. Nice house. Upper middle class, I'd reckon. 4 bedrooms, probably. The pumpkin sat on a massive, vaguely reptilian body that must have been 100 feet high. The monstrous thing took a step, and I heard the sound of thunder again as the ground shook. I hoped this beast wasn't hungry. One of Cooper's helicopters approached the thing, and it batted at the aircraft with short, flimsy arms to no avail. The helicopter deftly hovered just out of its reach and fired 2 massive artillery rounds into its gored head. What happened next was almost biblical, albeit a story from the Bible of some lost, exotic religion, a religion of a twisted people, from a twisted world, with an unhealthy focus on twisted vines. Pumpkin guts fell from the sky and covered all the combatants in slime, pulp, and seeds. The beast was slain, but its threat was far from neutralized. The massive golem collapsed onto the burning pharmacy. Its body caught fire immediately, wood and straw crackling as the flames grew. With Chatterskull Falls burning, we watched as more pumpkin men emerged from every corner, from every shadow. We were surrounded. Everyone was surrounded. And it seemed even the surrounders were surrounded. I emptied my revolver in short order, ridding us of 6 golems. Alright, it was only 5, but come on. 5 out of 6? That's something. Anne was having better results with her fireball wand, incinerating a few at a time. Still, they were closing in. There were just far too many of them. She stopped her firing and began to draw on the street with chalk. She made a circle around us and sketched out a few symbols therein. I disapproved of this passive tactic. Anne, what are you doing? Keep firing.
It's done, Joe. The wand is spent. I didn't get a chance to recharge it this morning.
Are you kidding? This is the best we have?
No, not kidding. Stay in the circle.
I sensed movement behind me and turned to face it. It was one of Roy's men with a pump shotgun in each hand. He tossed them into the circle, where I caught one and dropped the other. He was giddy with the thrill of battle, covered head to toe in pumpkin guts. Looks like you need a heater or two. These will do the trick. The bounty hunter ran back into the skirmish, firing twin revolvers at anything with a pumpkin at the top of its neck. Anne and I exchanged nervous glances and, without speaking, acknowledged that this might be our last ride together. I pumped the shotgun and chambered a shell. Anne did the same. There, in the glow of burning buildings and straw and sticks, we accepted our fate. We were saying goodbye, and there was no other way about it. Anne and I began to blast away at the encroaching enemies. Hope, caution, and fear be damned.